Ever wonder how a tiny seed can grow into a massive tree? Or, what actually creates the very air we breathe? Well, the answer to both questions lies in one of the most beautiful and essential processes on Earth: photosynthesis. All right, let's dive into the engine that powers pretty much all life as we know it. So let's just start with this one, kind of mind-boggling number: 130 terawatts. What does that even mean? Well, it's how much energy plants and algae are capturing from the sun every single second. We're going to put that number into perspective in just a bit, but first, let's see what's actually behind it.
So for this explainer, we're going to go on a journey of scale. We'll start with the really big picture, then we'll zoom all the way down into the microscopic factory where it all happens. We're going to uncover its secrets, see how it works, and then connect it all back to why it's so incredibly fundamental to our own existence.
Okay, first up, let's try to get a real handle on the sheer scale of this biological powerhouse. It's huge.
So what is it really? At its core, photosynthesis is just a masterpiece of natural engineering. It takes these super simple, abundant ingredients, sunlight, carbon dioxide from the air, and water, and it transforms them into chemical energy, basically sugar. And as a happy little byproduct, it releases oxygen.
To put that 130 terawatt figure in perspective, get this. It's about 8 times the total power consumed by all of human civilization combined. Every single second, plants are harnessing this astronomical amount of energy, and that forms the foundation of almost every single food chain on the planet.
But our understanding of this whole process, it didn't just happen overnight. It was this huge scientific mystery that was pieced together, bit by bit, over centuries by some really curious minds.
So the story really kicks off in the 1770s with Joseph Priestley. He noticed that plants could somehow restore air that a burning candle had, as he put it, injured. Then Jan Ingenhousz added a crucial piece of the puzzle: you need sunlight for it to work. Much later, Julius von Sachs identified glucose as the product. And then, in the 1930s, Cornelius von Neal came along and proved that the oxygen being released actually comes from splitting water molecules, not from carbon dioxide, which is what everyone had assumed.
And this is Priestley's classic experiment. In that first jar, you see the candle flame uses up all the good air, and it goes out. But in the second jar, when you add a mint plant, it seems to restore that air, keeping the flame lit and, crucially, the mouse alive. This was really the first solid proof that plants give off something that is absolutely essential for life.
So all that history eventually led us to this one really elegant equation. It takes 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water, adds a little light energy, and boom, you get 1 molecule of glucose, which is sugar, and 6 molecules of pure oxygen. This simple little line summarizes one of the most complex and vital chemical processes on the entire planet.
All right, now we're going to zoom in. I mean, way in. We're going past the leaf, past the plant cell, and right into the microscopic factory where all the action happens: the chloroplast. Think of the chloroplast like a tiny, self-contained factory. See the watery fluid inside? That's called the stroma, and it's kind of like the main factory floor. And then you have these stacks of flattened discs, the grana. They're made of individual thylakoids, and these are the specialized assembly lines where sunlight gets converted into chemical energy. You ever wonder why most plants are green? This graph right here holds the answer. The pigments inside plants, mostly chlorophylls, are experts at absorbing light in the blue, violet, and red parts of the spectrum to use for energy. But you can see they don't really absorb the green light very well at all. They just reflect it, and that reflected green light, that's what we see. Now, it's not just one pigment doing all the heavy lifting. It's a whole team. Chlorophyll A is the star player here, the one that kicks off the key chemical reactions. But it's got a whole support crew of accessory pigments, like chlorophyll B and carotenoids. What they do is absorb light at different wavelengths, which basically widens the range of usable sunlight. Plus, they help protect the main pigment from getting damaged. Pretty clever.
Okay, so how does this factory actually work? Well, the whole process is a beautifully coordinated 2-step recipe, running on 2 different but connected assembly lines. First up are the light-dependent reactions, which, as you can probably guess, need sunlight directly. And second are the light-independent reactions, which we often call the Calvin cycle. These use the products from that first step to actually build the sugars. So step 1, the light-dependent reactions. This all goes down in the thylakoid membranes, those factory assembly lines we talked about. Here, light energy is captured, and its first job is to split water molecules.
This process is called photolysis, and this is the exact moment oxygen gets released. That energy is then used to charge up two super important energy-carrying molecules, ATP and NADPH. You can think of them like tiny, rechargeable batteries.
And now for step 2, which happens out on the factory floor, in the stroma. The Calvin cycle takes those fully charged batteries, the ATP and NADPH, and uses their energy to pull carbon dioxide right out of the atmosphere. It then fixes that carbon into a sugar, which can then be turned into glucose and other things the plant needs. So this is it. This is the moment the actual food gets made.
But this process, it isn't perfect. Under certain stressful conditions, the factory can become pretty inefficient, and that's where evolution has stepped in with some absolutely brilliant upgrades.
So here's the problem. There's this key enzyme that grabs CO2. It's called rubisco. But sometimes it gets confused. When it's hot and dry, it can accidentally grab an oxygen molecule instead of a carbon dioxide molecule. And this process, called photorespiration, is just a total waste. It doesn't produce any sugar, and it actually costs the plant precious energy.
To solve this, some plants, like corn and sugarcane, evolved a completely new system. They developed this special Cran's leaf anatomy you see here. You can think of it like a turbocharger. It actively pumps carbon dioxide into these specialized inner cells. This keeps the CO2 concentration super high right where rubisco is working, so it doesn't get distracted by oxygen.
And when you look at the results of these two different approaches, it's crystal clear. Standard C3 plants like wheat, they're great in cooler climates. But C4 plants like maize, they have a massive advantage when things get hot. By basically eliminating that wasteful photorespiration, they can thrive in high-temperature environments where a C3 plant would really struggle.
All right, now that we've seen all those amazing little details, let's zoom back out and connect this all back to the big picture. And, more importantly, back to you.
So why does all this matter? Well, to put it simply, everything depends on it. Photosynthesis is the ultimate source of nearly all the food we eat and, the oxygen we breathe. Every single year, it locks away over 100 billion tons of carbon into biomass, forming the absolute base of virtually every ecosystem on Earth. Without it, our planet would be, it would be unrecognizable.
This ancient process literally terraformed our world. It created the oxygen-rich atmosphere that allowed complex life like us to evolve in the first place. So the big question for us now is, as we face massive challenges like food security and climate change, can we learn from and maybe even engineer this process to help build a sustainable future?